Let's deal with some issues today. I know there's a lot out there, and the world has changed. It hit me that in the last few weeks, it suddenly hit me that the world is like full of anti-Semitism. Now, you would say, Yishai, duh, you're like in the business for a long time. And the truth is, I am in the business for a long time, but I've never seen it like this. And I remember something that I said years ago, that I'm not going to talk about anti-Semitism. I'm going to help people fall in love with Israel, connect with Israel. And I'm not going to talk too much about, I'm not going to be one of these guys who's always spewing the problems of anti-Semitism until such a time that anti-Semitism is going to become so big and rampant that it's time to talk about it. And sadly, that is what has become. I was listening to Israeli news today, and they were like, this is the most just war that Israel's ever fought. I don't know if that's true, but it is certainly a very just war. And yet we don't seem to have legitimacy from the world. Now, one could say, who cares what the world says? And that's actually an important stance. You have to have an element of being able to say, I don't care. I'm here to survive. I'm Jewish. You guys have a track record of anti-Semitism and Israel hate. You didn't save us in the Holocaust, and I don't care what you say. That's true on the one hand. On the other hand, why should we allow the world to be permeated, and infiltrated by lies against us? Why should we have such a blackening of our name? In Israel and in other places, when somebody lies about you, defames you, that's something you could take them to court for. Like, we are being defamed. That reminds me that I maybe I'll do a video where I'm taking people to court for defamation. Another video that I just remembered now that I wanted to make is how Islam is actually using our trademarks and our patents in Judaism and are stealing them away. Like Jerusalem. Jerusalem is Jewish. But the good news is, I want to tell you the good news is, we are actually not starving the Palestinian people or the Gazans. We're not starving them. And there are places, especially in northern Gaza, where there's a humanitarian challenge, maybe even a crisis. But middle of Gaza, southern Gaza are eating. There's tons of videos of them with restaurants and at the shuk and all that kind of stuff. And of course, we're trying to get food, and we should get food to northern Gaza because we should be the sovereigns there, and we should take care of any people that are in our land. Moreover, we should help. The most important thing that is never discussed out there, the real anti-Semitism and real anti-Arabism, is that there's no refugees. We're fighting a war with a combatant called Hamas, and there are many non-combatants, and they should be out of the picture. The way you get them out of the picture is by helping refugees leave and find safety and a normal life somewhere else. 4.5 million refugees in the Ukraine-Russia war, up to 10 million refugees in the Syrian civil war, and yet practically no refugees out of Gaza. That is absurd, and that should be the talk of the town. Instead, the talk of the town is actually recognizing, after October the 7th, instead of saying that Israel should be the sovereign, instead, now, almost 2 years later, we are at a state that the world is moving towards recognition of a Palestinian state. That goes to show you that Israeli diplomacy has been in a little bit of trouble. We've heard it from France. We've also heard it now from the UK. And we have with us somebody who is an expert in UK-ness. His name is Jonathan Neumann, and his accent will give it away that he's from England, Britain, or the UK. Sometimes it gets confusing. And he is a commentator on politics and religion, and is also the best-selling author of To Heal the World: How the Jewish Left Corrupts Judaism and Endangers Israel. Jonathan Neumann, shalom, and welcome to the program. Great to have you.
Yishai, it is great to be back. It was even greater seeing you in the flesh in the holy city of Hebron yesterday.
That's right. That's right. It was fun to tour you, and we were actually touring with the great Avi Abelow's group, A Pulse of Israel, and that was really very special for me. And you were on that tour. And last I knew you, I met you in Limud many years ago. You were still living in the UK, and I think you were studying law. What happened since?
Well, I've made Aliyah as all Jews ultimately must. to the holy city of Yerushalayim, which is where I'm speaking to you now, and still writing, still commentating, and yeah, there's no shortage of things to talk about, as you just said.
Jonathan, anti-Semitism. It's of a different. If it's a different it's a different quantity and therefore a different quality. It's something's different in my sense from over here in Israel. I haven't been out yet. I'm actually flying out in a little bit, but is that your sense also that the world is a different place? Is it an exaggeration or is it really something's different about the world and its relationship to Israel today?
I think you're right. I think something has changed. I think the pervasiveness and longevity of the anti-Semitism that we're seeing is unprecedented. We always know that there are spikes in anti-Semitism around the world when there is an issue in Israel, when it's being attacked by the Arabs and having to defend itself, and so on. So we know that. But in the past, these conflagrations have never lasted that long. The pressure has always been very intense on Israel to stop, and Israel has usually done so. I think 2014, was kind of the longest of the Gaza wars. What was that, like 50 days or something? And now we're talking a year and a half, more than a year and a half on. So it's really emboldened a lot of the extremists that we're seeing in places like London, but also in New York and LA, throughout the West. And the authorities simply haven't tackled the issue. That's emboldened them more, and they're getting more and more impassioned as they see Israel and the Jews winning. They can't take that. It was interesting what you were saying earlier. It made me think that actually, you remember when all the world leaders visited Israel in the few days after the 7th of October, and it was kind of, the world was sort of on the Jews' side then because we were losing. And now actually, we're seeing all these recognitions, and maybe we can take some solace in them because it's a sign that the Jews are winning, and they're looking at that and they're not happy about that. And that's kind of the zeitgeist, right? So that's why we're getting a lot of this pushback, because suddenly the Jews are a powerful player in the Middle East, and people are uncomfortable with that.
So that's the way you see it. You see it as because of like Jewish winning, Jewish strength. Do you think that that's what's bothering kids on campus? They see Jewish strength and they're jealous of it, or they're hateful of it, or do they think that they're just being brainwashed as though there's this big evil Jewish state that is manhandling and abusing this small minority of ethnic indigenous peoples called Palestinians? Israel is a Johnny come lately kind of white colonialist occupier, and the Arabs are indigenous, they're brown, they're from here, and they have the indigenous and ancient status as opposed to the Jewish people, and that's the thing. I mean, I that's what I would think is more the motivation on campus.
I think that mentality is absolutely there. I think that's absolutely right. I'm just saying that I think that the passion that we're seeing, the growing passion, and the fact that these new steps are being taken is because the Jews are succeeding.
Hmm.
So for all the reasons that you say, they already don't like Israel. They already don't like the Jewish state. They already don't like what's going on. But that's driving them even wilder. That the Jews are winning, that the Jews are succeeding, and that goes against what's supposed to happen.
Okay, let's talk about England. Okay, um, you know, England has a special place in my heart because, on the one hand, because I'm a student of history, I think that people don't understand the role that the British leadership at the turn of at the victory of World War One and the destruction of the Ottoman Empire, the outsized influence that the UK, that England had in really creating a Jewish state. I always try to teach this to people, and I feel like I'm maybe not doing it enough. But the state of Israel isn't really born in 1948. The modern state of Israel is really born in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, with the victory over the Ottomans, with the creation uh, of a mandate to build a Jewish state that was sanctioned by the League of Nations, that was run by England, and it really started off very beautifully. It made political sense. They thought that the Jews could help secure the Suez Canal. It made religious sense because they wanted to fix what Christendom had done to the Jews, and they wanted to be part of restoration. Restorationism was a great movement in the UK. And then in the 30s, already late 20s, they started turning. They started turning real bad. They started turning anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, pro-Arab oil. Today, the UK is that goodness that I talked about in 1917 is barely found. It's barely found. And we have Piers Starmer. Is that right? Did I say it right? And also, let's talk about even another personality, which is like Piers Morgan, a show that I've been on. He's platformed a lot of anti-Israel people, and now the British government is poised to recognize the Palestine on our land at the in the kind of in the fog or in the smoke of the October 7th war. So help me understand British psychology these days. How bad is the Islamic jihadist infiltration into London? You know, how left and progressive are the folks out there? Is it overblown? Is it maybe overblown? Is it safe in England? Is it really like not true? Is it not so bad? Give me a sense of both British psychology and British reality.
Sure. Okay. There's a great deal to unpack there. I love that you started with 1917 and the British role in the Middle East, because you know what's amazing is that you see in the West, and you get it obviously in the UK as well, all this kind of self-flagellation about, you know, colonization and the British role in the past, and you get it in America with you know, with treatment of minorities, all of this kind of stuff, looking back at history and how terrible it was in the British Empire and so on. And you get people like Keir Starmer and the left that he represents and so on. Obviously, they hate British history, and you know, they look back at all these things with shame. And yet, what they've just done now, this recognition, this so-called recognition, and all of that, it is a neo-colonial
Hmm.
initiative, right? It's basically Britain saying, "Oh, we're still an important power in the world, and we can still dictate to these lesser, you know, these lesser states what their borders should be and shouldn't be." I use borders loosely because, of course, one of the whole issues with this are like, well, what are the borders of this fictitious state that you want to create? But leave that aside. It's this kind of, yeah, we drew up the borders of the Middle East before, we'll do it again. So isn't it amazing how, you know, we're all against colonialism, except when it comes to the Jews, when we can dictate the terms to them. But that's just by way of introduction. But let's unpack a bit about what you said. Um, Indulge me for just a second. Let me tell you a bit about the political scene in the UK. Last year, there was a general election that brought Keir Starmer to power. The Conservatives' 14 years of government are kicked out by the electorate. They became very unpopular, whole bunch of reasons. But Keir Starmer comes in with this huge majority, but it's not because he's popular. His ratings are actually very low, and since then they've completely tanked. So how is it that they get this majority? What you really saw, in addition to the unpopularity of the Conservatives, was a fragmentation of British politics in a way that we've never seen before. Usually the UK politics is two main parties and one or two smaller parties, the Liberals and the Scots and so on. What we saw in this election was the rise of fringe parties on the right, like Nigel Farage's Reform Party got a bunch of seats. But on the far left, the Green Party, and also a bunch of Gaza independents. So Jeremy Corbyn was one of them. He'd been expelled from the Labour Party by Keir Starmer, you know, the former anti-Semitic leader of the Labour Party. He'd been expelled, but he ran as an independent and won, made a big thing about Gaza and a bunch of other things. But a whole bunch of other people appealed to this kind of growing sectarianism in the UK, and they became MPs, 4 of them plus Corbyn, and they made an informal alliance between them. So between the Green Party getting...
His voice is
Pardon?
back. So Corbyn is back and his voice is back in British politics.
Oh yeah, but from the, you know, from the backbenchers, it's still fringe and so on. But it reflected a big shift. I mean, first past the post politics, like you have in the States with congressional districts. You know, how many independent congressmen do you get in the States? Like 0. It's incredibly difficult to, you know, to push. It's not like Israel or Italy or whatever. You have proportional representation. You know, anyone and his dog can become a member of parliament. You just need, you know, 1-3%, whatever, of the vote. In the UK, you know, you need to really engage with your community and so on. And it wasn't just these 5 Gaza independents that come in. In a whole bunch of other constituencies, they came really close. I mean, they knocked out some major Labour figures in some of those constituencies. They came really close to knocking out a bunch of others. This was a real wave. This is a real big, you know, unheard of thing, this kind of sectarian politics in the UK. And it reflects demographic shifts. I just learned today, you know, Yahya has become the 93rd most popular name in the UK. Can you believe that? The leader of Hamas, the assassinated leader of Hamas, his name has become the 93rd most popular name in the UK. Obviously, there are plenty of other
93rd
names.
Yeah, 93rd is way down there. Did you say 93rd?
93rd, yeah. I mean, that's, you know, it's, I mean, you got George and Max
Nigel.
and Elliot and all these, all these other names, and you've also got, to have the leader. I mean, it's like Osama, it's like Osama becoming like a hugely popular name, in the US, a few years, or in Europe a few years after like 9/11. I mean, that is serious stuff, right? Now Corbyn and some other this young figure Zara Sultana, got a big following. Labour MP was sort of suspended, now quit the party. Got a big following, fairly charismatic, but nothing really much to say for herself. They're going to form this new party on the far left of the Labour Party. They want to to the left of Labour. They want to really galvanise the sectarian vote. So that's really important background, because at the end of the day, politics is local. Much as Starmer wants to be part of the France, Canada, loving, let's all recognize Palestine, this is the real issue, right? This is what he's really looking over his shoulder about. He's got this far left threat, and he needs to neutralize it, and he thinks this is the way.
So is the far left threat that you're talking about, is that British white people, or is that immigrants, Muslims, and that whole thing? Like, what's
yeah. It's a mix. It's got to be said. There are elements of the Muslim population, but there's also a lot of far left, white, 1,000 years British, whatever, are on the streets and all of that. They're all part of the same movement. I mean, Palestine Action, there was a group that was throwing red paint on everything, intimidating Jewish people, just, ruining businesses. They attacked an RAF base, Royal Air Force base recently. So they just got prescribed as a terrorist organization. There are a few kind of radical, Islamists involved in that, but it's mostly, young, white, middle class people. So we've really got to contend with that. And even within the Muslim community, it's not just, migrants, people coming over the channel in dinghies, illegal immigrants or legal immigrant students and so on. That's part of that. But a lot of the radicalization is in second, third generation, British Muslims. So you had in the 60s, 70s, Muslims would come, immigrate to the UK, integrated, became doctors, became professionals, contributed to society. And it's a lot of their kids and grandkids that are starting to become radicalized. That is a much bigger problem than dealing with illegal immigrants, whom you can deport and so on. These people are British. They don't know any other country. They've not lived in other countries. So, how do you deal with that? That's a problem that Britain and a lot of Western countries, they have not come up with an answer for. And that's why a lot of the right-wing parties across the continent are surging, because it's a massive issue.
Is there right-wing parties that are strong in England today?
So Nigel Farage's Reform Party is really surging in the polls. It just smashed it in local municipality elections a few months ago. He is the favorite right now to become the next prime minister. Now, granted, that's 4 years away, but Nigel Farage is the favorite right now to become the prime minister, at least with being the largest party and possibly even being a majority. But it's 4 years away. It's really early days. But the very fact that this is even a trend shows you, the depth of feeling on immigration issues and these kind of extremism issues.
And he's what? He's anti-immigration into Europe, and he's pro-Israel, pro-strong Israel. Am I right?
He is broadly, I think, instinctively is pro-Israel. There's some other people in his party who are very pro-Israel. I think there's other people in his party who are kind of a bit more old school, anti-Semites. It's similar to kind of the MAGA movement in the States. Trump is, instinctively very on side, sometimes says some weird things, but, does a lot of great things. But, in his grassroots, it's very mixed. You get super pro-Israel people, and then you're getting some more and more lunatics, who are anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and so on. So it's similar to that, but like everything in England, it's more subdued than in the US.
Is the British right wing also under attack from woke right, from Candace Owens type ideas? Like, is the British getting infected with that stuff?
Fortunately, not for the time being. I don't want to say not yet. I hope it's just a no. But that hasn't happened yet. The UK is still quite a few years behind the States in a lot of ways. I mean, there is a new channel called GB News that's kind of a sort of Fox News equivalent, and that's been enormously successful in the last few years. But it's very kind of mainstream right, pro-Israel, anti-extremism. So in that respect, the British right is in quite a positive place as far as I think the Jews and Israel are concerned. And by the way, the Conservative Party, which is still the main opposition party, their leader is very pro-Israel. There's some anti-Israel people on some of the backbenchers, but their leader, Kemi Badenoch, originally Nigerian, British, and very pro-Israel, really on side on all these issues.
You've given us a little bit of hope here about the UK. No, seriously, I'm serious. I'm glad we discussed it because I thought it was like totally out of control. Let's watch a little bit of video, and I want to get your commentary on the video about what's going on in England. It's a Hebrew video with subtitles from Channel 11. But let's watch it and get some of your comments.
Fantastic to see you all and welcome to Downing Street.
Yeah, it's lovely here.
אל תתרשמו משיחת החולין הזו של קיר סטארמר, ראש ממשלת בריטניה, עם קבוצת הלוויות אחרי ניצחונן במשחקי היורו לנשים. הדרמה העיקרית התרחשה כנראה במהלך האירוח של דונלד טראמפ מסקוטלנד, כשלפי כל הערכות טראמפ נתן לסטארמר או ירוק להכרה במדינה פלסטינית בדומה למקרון, בין היתר כדי להפעיל לחץ על ישראל לסיים את המלחמה בעזה.
Okay, so you hear this? The Channel 11 is claiming, and I spoke today with my friend Eugene Kontorovich, who told me not to trust this report. They're claiming that Trump gave Starmer a green light to recognize Palestine to put pressure on Israel to stop the war. What do you make of that? I don't believe it. What do you make of it?
I don't know. I find it difficult to believe. Honestly, there's a lot of stuff that comes out of the Israeli media that I got to take with a pinch of salt. They there's a lot of characters there. They've got their own agendas. I was actually hoping that with Trump in the UK, he was in the UK this week. He was in Scotland, and Starmer didn't announce anything on Palestine recognition or anything, even as Macron was. And it seemed like Trump is in town. He's not going to do something like that, and maybe the whole thing will pass. And then as soon as Trump goes, he says it. I can't see that. And even the fact that Trump said to him in the meeting, you've got to get a control of immigration and all of that. It's difficult to say. Who knows with any of this stuff, but I can't see it. Why would the Americans be so supportive of Israel at this time and then do something like that?
Let's keep going.
With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act. So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September.
ההחלטה הדרמטית נפלה בישיבה מיוחדת של ממשלת בריטניה היום, כשקיר סטארמר אמר לשריו שבריטניה תכיר במדינת פלסטין בספטמבר, בטרם כינוס העצרת הכללית של האו"ם, בדומה לצרפת, אלא אם ממשלת ישראל תנקוט בצעדים משמעותיים שיובילו לסיום המצב המטריד בעזה.
It's pretty rare to hold a cabinet meeting during Parliament's summer break.
סטארמר הוסיף שאין מקום להשוואה בין ישראל לחמאס, שדרישות בריטניה מחמאס נותרו בעינן, ושעד ספטמבר יבחן שנית את המצב בטרם תתקבל החלטה סופית.
Don't forget that we went into the last election with a manifesto commitment to delivering statehood for Palestine. Today we're going to be discussing, yes, the immediate crisis that sits before us, but also, of course, paying regard to those long-term issues as well.
I mean, you watch this stuff and you ask yourself, what do they care? Why are they in our business? What, don't they have their own problems? Don't they have European problems? Don't they have British problems? Like, why are they in our business? And not to mention, there's so many crises around the world, in Sudan, in Nigeria, in Yemen, in a million places. There's all kinds of horrible, real human crisis situations. Why are they in our business all the time? What's their deal?
It's absolutely a double standard, and it's sorry, but it comes down to anti-Semitism. But it's not that they are the it's that they are having to appeal to constituencies for whom this is the number one issue. As I said, the politics is local. They even mentioned in that footage that it's unusual in a parliamentary recess, the MPs on holiday and all of that, to call the cabinet back to have this discussion. It's all window dressing. It's all this kind of nonsense optics to try to tell this far left constituency that they're really taking action on this. And the fact that they are they put What was the statement? What were they actually saying? They said that they will recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September unless Israel takes, what they call substantive steps to end this so-called appalling situation in Gaza. And they're saying Israel has to agree to a ceasefire, it has to commit to long-term sustainable peace that delivers a so-called two-state solution.
Right.
And
So
that it has
it's either two-state or two-state, right? It's either
Right.
two-state, we'll recognize it later, or to give us two-state right now by stopping this war and letting Hamas continue to rule Gaza.
Exactly, and allowing the UN to restart the supply of aid, which, as you and I and your viewers will know, is basically just, UN aid fuels the Hamas war machine because they seize that aid, they monopolize it, they sell it to the population, they distribute it in ways that aggrandize their power. So that's what, in effect, the UK is saying. But what's extraordinary is that there's all these conditions on Israel, right, to avoid this outcome. But what about Hamas? Not a word on Hamas, not a word on the hostages. And one of the cabinet members the business secretary came out today to kind of clarify what the prime minister was saying, and he said, "Yeah, we're not asking anything of Hamas. Why? Because Hamas is a terrorist organization, and the UK doesn't negotiate with terrorists, which of course is a total lie. But anyway, the UK supposedly doesn't negotiate with terrorists, so we're not going to give them we're not going to make any conditions on them." What kind of perverse moral logic is that you're going to go after the country that's trying to defend itself and give them an ultimatum, your supposed ally, and put conditions on them and nothing on Hamas? And it's not only morally warped, but it is politically imbecilic. What kind of incentive structure is this? You're saying to Hamas, you don't have to do anything. You're our enemy. We're not going to demand anything from you. But from our supposed friend, our ally Israel, we're going to put a bunch of conditions on them to try to weaken them in order for them to do what we want them to do, to appease some domestic constituency. It is absolutely insane. And I've got to say, these people generally aren't that stupid. This is not only morally crazy, but I think this is the biggest example of political morality, I got to say, that I've ever seen. And I don't usually criticize people I disagree with as being stupid, but this is monumentally stupid.
Well, it seems like Israel's not cool, and I argue that legitimacy actually comes from this thing that Israelis don't think enough about, which is cool. I even had Einat Wilf on the show, and I suggested to her, I'm like, we're not cool amongst young people and amongst constituencies. And then politicians translate that into illegitimacy when they speak of trying to limit our rights to fight this war. And we're also, the other flip coin, the other side of the coin of cool is that we're not very clear. We're not being very clear about what our mission is. We have a lot, we're speaking from a lot of sides here. It's not clear what Israel's policy is, what it exactly aims to achieve vis-a-vis the conflict in Gaza. So we want to destroy Hamas. We don't want them to rule, but we want to make a deal with them. We want to feed them, and at the same time, we know there's a humanitarian situation, and we don't help them leave. So there's a lot of like these weird messages that Israel sends out, and one way or the other, the mechanisms of cool, those who create coolness, we're not on their side right now. And so politicians, detract from our legitimacy because we're not so very cool right now. And that's a tough place to be in. I definitely feel like, oh my gosh, my country is not seen as cool right now. That hurts. I think that hurts. You have to be strong. And as a Jew, you got to go through these kind of things. But it hurts. Does it bother you that the country that you're from is going that way?
It does, but as I said, there are political bright spots. Look, I don't like to see Israel and anti-Semitism become, what we call a wedge issue, an issue that divides parties, anti-Semitism and ideally support for Israel. Those should be things that unite everyone. It's sad and distressing to see that that's not the case, but at least it means that we still do have a lot of friends. I don't want to downplay the situation. The situation in the UK for ordinary Jewish people is it's bad. The situation is for the society
is it in the streets? Is it bad in the streets? Is it uncomfortable for Jewish people to live there? Is Aliyah being discussed more amongst the average British Jew?
I think it definitely is, and Aliyah figures have doubled. I mean, they're always quite small from the UK, but they have doubled in the past year. It's definitely being considered more. I think the situation in the UK in terms of anti-Semitism is both less bad and worse than people realize. It's less bad in the sense that people look at the UK, particularly a lot of people in Israel, they say, I don't want to travel there, or if I go there, I don't want to walk around with a kippah, with a skull cap, with a neck, Star of David necklace. I want to, hide my identity and so on. And, there are risks to showing your Jewish identity, but they're not enormous. It's not like you're guaranteed to be beaten up. There isn't huge amounts of violence. But you might get some looks, you might get a bit of abuse here and there, but that's not such a big deal. In that respect, it's not as bad as people think. What's worse is the pervasiveness of it. The fact you can't escape it. If you're living in the UK, you turn on the BBC, you read the newspapers, you're seeing this vilification, demonization of Israel, which is impacting you and your Jewish identity. When your kids go to school, if they go to a Jewish school, they got to cover their uniform, so it doesn't, they don't show that they're going to a Jewish school. If they go to a non-Jewish school, they're going to feel ostracized and alienated. We know the situation on campuses for students, but also in workplaces, in hospitals, in cultural institutions. There was a Verdi opera 2 weekends ago at the Royal Opera House in London, one of the premier opera houses in the world. And this was the last night of the show. And in the curtain call, one of the cast unfurled the flag of the Palestinian Authority. One of the backstage hands tried to wrest it from him and couldn't. So it's just pervasive. You're seeing this kind of thing everywhere, and even the people that you're supposed to be able to turn to, where the police or university administrators, they're not really doing the regulators. They're not doing their jobs. They're not really helping people in the way that they should be. That's the issue. You feel alone. You feel there's no one to help you. But that doesn't mean you going outside, you're gonna get injured or something. It's a different kind of threat, but it's insidious, it's pervasive, it's omnipresent, and that's very difficult for a Jewish person. And you Jewish people have got to make a choice. Am I going to stay a proud and strong Jew, or am I gonna kind of cower and submit and let this affect me? That's the question that Jews in Britain and in a lot of countries in the world need to ask themselves.
I guess that's what you asked yourself as well. And you've made your choice to come here to the land. And I hope that works out well for you. And I hope that British folks also feel that Israel is welcoming to them, and that the process is good, and that they feel that there's economic opportunities here. As I've been saying the last few days, I think that Israel's got two modalities. Maybe I said it on our tour as well, two different modalities. One modality is light unto the nations. Israel's a good country. Israel's got what to give and wants to give. It's got medicine, and it's got technology, and it's got spirituality. It's got a lot of things to give. But when the world hates the Jewish people, then thank God we have a Jewish state, and it turns its modality to something else, which is more akin to Noah's Ark. It's a place of defense. It's a refuge. And that's what Israel is right now. It's a refuge from the hate out there. Sadly, for those nations, anti-Semitism, it's not anti-Jewish, it's self-destructive. It necessarily shrinks those countries. It shrinks them. It weakens them. It turns them into something dark and bad inside. Anti-Semitism is a inner depression. It's an inner erosion, and it hurts those societies where that happens. The Jews, they suffer, but they survive. That's just the nature of the Jewish people. But those societies, they shrink. And look at England. Was not so long ago a giant empire. At its heyday, just not so long ago, when it was supporting the Jews, soon afterwards began to shrink and shrink and shrink, and it's what I call an annoying island full of jihadism today. Even though it's great traditions and great things that we can still recall, but overall, its impact is small, and it's not nearly what it used to be. Final comments from you, sir.
Oh, I mean, it is wonderful to be in Israel. It is, the way that the world sees Israel right now and what it's like to be in Israel are just two totally different things.
Right? Is that funny? Isn't that funny? Like our reality inside is totally different than what people perceive it to be.
Exactly. And, day-to-day life in Israel, thank God, continues. Israel is thriving. The Tel Aviv stock market is doing better than ever. I don't know if that's just El Al's stock price, carrying everything else. I don't know, but things are good. There are hardships. Some families obviously being incredibly affected by the war. Can't downplay that at all. But This is a resilient country. It is a defined country, and it is a united country, much more than it was before the war. It is a beautiful thing to be able to experience, and I encourage anyone watching us today to come and visit Israel the earliest opportunity that you have. We will be delighted to have you here, and you are always welcome.
Jonathan Neumann is a commentator on politics and religion and the best-selling author of To Heal the World, How the Jewish Left Corrupts Judaism and Endangers Israel. That book did well, did it?
It did. But still copies out there. Pick them up.
You need addendums, right? Do you write addendums to the book every few years? Is there a post-October 7th chapter yet?
In some ways, it's a depressing book, and in even sadder ways, it's aged very well. But it's still relevant.
Johnny Newman, thank you so much for being with us today, and I hope people really do check out your book, To Heal the World, ? How the Jewish Left Corrupts Judaism and Endangers Israel. In fact, my next segment today is about Peter Beinart on the Jon Stewart show. Did you see this yet?
I haven't.
Jon Stewart interviewed Peter Beinart, and they are just like, oh, everybody calls us bad Jews, but we're really moral authorities, and we really have a heart for the other side. We don't give a damn about our country, our Jewish country, but we'll be, as a Jews, we'll put it on top of we'll wear the yellow star proudly. We're Jewish, and we'll promote the other side and promote the jihad against Israel, and then we'll be morally superior. It's great stuff, and that's coming up on my show right now. I guess that's the stuff you wrote about.
It is. Always a pleasure, Yishai. Lovely to see you.
God bless you. Thank you so much for being with us, Jonathan Neumann. Check out his book,